Candidates, Providence faces no bigger financial threat over the next 20 years than the city pension fund. All of you are familiar with this topic. The shortfall in the fund is now $1.25 billion, and this year alone, Providence taxpayers have to put $100 million of their tax money into the fund. Recently, city leaders have rallied around this idea of shoring up the pension fund by borrowing hundreds of millions of dollars through a bond. But as we see interest rates rise, that's uncertain, possibly even unlikely. So, Mr. Cuervo, I'm going to start with you on this question. If the bond isn't an option, since it is no guarantee, do you have a plan B to lower pension costs? Or do taxpayers otherwise just need to accept they're going to get this 5% a year bill for the next 20 years?
The challenge that we have is that our annual payment into the pension fund continues to grow at a rate that exceeds the growth of the city's budget. You know, it's growing at approximately 5%, which is almost 2 points over what the budget grows every year. This is unsustainable. This is like a household having to have their mortgage go up continuously, month after month after month. What we need to have is the pension obligation bond was an important tool. It was a tool that will probably be on the shelf for a while and may be out of the question because of the rising interest rates, which was an important safeguard that was put into place for this process. Let's make that clear. But there's an opportunity for us to grow the city's tax base quicker by expanding economic development, by ensuring that there is more growth in the housing market, in the development market, and by ensuring that our large institutional nonprofits are paying their fair share. Currently, 40% of the city's land, the city's property, is tax exempt. Not all of that is owned by the large institutions. Some of that is owned by the federal government and the state government.
But to be clear, that means you're saying that you don't see any way to lower the money that's going to be going out the door of the city budget into the pension fund. You're just saying we have to find more money elsewhere, hopefully with economic growth, maybe from Brown or something like that.
Well, the reality is that the pension payments that we're making are paying into pension promises that were made decades ago. And we've already been through a court battle. We already realized that there's very limited things that the city can do to change what happened in the past. Looking forward, we can make sure that we don't fall into that trap again. But the reality is that these are pension benefits that were promised in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And those benefits are going to age out eventually. And what we need to be ready for is to be able to grow the city's economy so that we can sustain this growth over that period of time.
All right, Mr. Smiley, the same question to you. The pension bond, again, we're going to take it off the table for the moment because you can't do the pension bond right now. So without that, what, if anything, is your plan B to lower how much of the city budget has to go into the pension fund in the next 20 years?
Yeah, so for the last year plus, I've been talking about the opportunity to get into the state system, the MERS system. I think that there's a lot of benefits to it, and I thought that it might require the pension obligation bond as a way to buy into. Were the pension obligation bond to no longer be an option, it's still a negotiation to have with the state, and it might still be on the table. Right now, we pay our own lawyers, our own investment advisors, our own bankers to get the same advice that the state gets. It's just one more contract that the mayor gets to give out, and we don't get any additional value for it. It's a waste on the system. I think if we were in the state system, we would save those transaction costs. We would also have access to investment products that we don't currently have. You talk about the unfunded pension liability. The funded portion is only about $300 million. We pay out almost $100 million in benefits every year. We make those payments every month. And yet the city makes its contribution once in the summer. And so the city keeps a disproportionate share of its investments in cash or cash equivalents in order to meet those cash flow needs.
But I've watched those negotiations to go into the state system, and the state wants to see that the pension fund has been stabilized already. Yes. Then you can come into the state fund. Why would the other 39 cities and towns ever go along with bringing a fund that's 21 to 23% funded into the state system, instantly making it the largest liability in that system?
Because if the city of Providence were to go under, the state would bail us out. And so I would work with, which is a circumstance that I will avoid at all costs. And so the state understands that the capital city is critical to its long-term success, just like we understand that our long-term success depends on the state's long-term success. We are in this together. And so I would work closely with state leaders to help identify and make sure that everyone at the State House understands the dilemma that we're in and sees the benefits to us joining their system. Because the other thing that they would protect against is the largest reason that we're in this mess in the first place is, as Gonzalo pointed out, benefits that were given out that were very generous, but also that payments were skipped or paid short. And the compounding effect of that is $1 billion.
But we're not. The city has been skipping payments for years now.
Right. However, municipalities that are in MERS never skip a payment because the state diverts other state aid to make sure that those municipalities make their payments. And so part of the bargain for the state is by taking us into the state system, you can be assured that, because we're in the pension business for decades or centuries, that in the future mayors will never skip a payment and the capital city won't find itself in this problem ever again.
All right, we may be testing viewers' patience for pension talk, Ms. LaFortune, but it's such an important issue. Same question to you. Plan B if the pension bond can't happen, which does look potentially unlikely.
Right. So the pension system right now is 23% funded, about 23% funded. To get it out of the critical state, we need to get to about 60% funded. We see the rise of the pension expenses rise by 5% annually, but our revenue, it's only about 2%. In 2018, I actually worked on the pension report with my former council colleague, Sam Zurier, and we outlined some recommendations. Transitioning into the state pension system, that was certainly one of them. However, we can't do it automatically because we still need to make sure that we're able to pay into the current pension system so that our retirees are receiving their benefits. We also should look at some of our city assets, including buildings like some of the fire stations that the city has not been utilizing to generate some revenue. We also should be working with the nonprofit institutions who are not paying taxes on their non-mission driven properties. I actually passed legislation about 2 years ago calling for a full assessment of the pilot program, and earlier this year, the city came out with a report saying that we have to partner with them.
Let me ask you, Ms. LaFortune, like your colleagues, none of you have mentioned touching pension benefits at this point. I asked City Hall today, the highest paid retiree in Providence currently takes home almost $200,000 a year, most of it tax-free. The median household in the city makes $49,000. As mayor, are you saying there's just no way at this point to touch that, and that $200,000 check's going to keep going to him for the rest of his life?
Legally, we still have to pay. By law, we have to pay out the pension benefits to the retirees. And not all retirees are receiving that type of benefit. In fact, while knocking on doors, I met a retired firefighter. He's certainly not one of the people who are receiving that level of payment. He's working, he relies on his pension to be able to pay his bills, to be able to pay his mortgage. So that's not a narrative for all people, but we do need to look at other avenues to pay into the pension if within the next 5 years the market is not favorable to the city. And we've outlined some recommendations to do so.